Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of Extra Time for In Scout Network presented by me, Baker Lilivic. And today we've got a guest which I'm excited about because it's different. It's away from the world of football, but some of these points that we talk about can relate to football a lot. And that is Nicky Perfect. And Nicky, you're a former hostage and crisis negotiator and now a communication and negotiation coach. So looking forward to chatting with you all about your career, and I'm sure we'll get some big takeaways from this episode. But firstly, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, Baker. Thank you. And I'd just like to clarify for you and the listeners that perfect really is my surname. My dad always used to say to my mum he was born perfect and she only became it when she met and married him. Sadly, we lost
Ah,
my dad in 2022, but I always like to start anything with that joke in memory of him. So thank you for letting me do that. But yes, it really is my surname, perfect.
no, it's nice that you get to do that, and I'm kind of in the same boat as you there because my first name is Baker,
Mm.
and the amount of times I get asked by people, "Is your first name actually Baker?"
Yeah,
I always say, "Yeah, it is actually," but I get that question a lot, so yeah, I can relate to you with that one. But no, nice way to start the episode. Thanks so much for coming on again, and
pleasure.
yeah. It's we kind of start these episodes by asking our guest how they kind of got into the profession that they did. It's usually football, but for you, Nicky, same thing goes really. How did you kind of get involved, and what was life like for you growing up, and how did you get involved with the role that you eventually got into?
Yeah, so I'm originally from West London, a place called Ealing. I love London, and I grew up there I'm a late 60s baby, so growing up there and going to school all around there. And I really enjoyed being in Ealing. I really enjoyed school. However, I didn't go to school for academia. I went to school for music, sport, and chatting in the main, and which was my favorite pastime. Going to lessons was kind of an add-on that I sort of had to do. I really struggled with maths. I still find numbers quite challenging and difficult. And yeah, my background was one just I was brought up with my sister in Ealing. I always look back on my life as being pretty good. My mum's pretty sure that I had ADHD when I was a kid, and she thinks I still now have it as an adult, undiagnosed. And I think as a young person, I felt a little bit confused and a little bit that I didn't fit, if I'm honest. And then in when I was 18 and I was in the first year of my A levels, my dad said to me, "Well, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?" And I was like, "Well, I've got no idea, Dad, to be honest." He said, "Well, do you want to go to university?" And I was like, "Not really sure." And he said, "Well, what do you like doing?" And I said, "Well, I enjoy sport, so maybe something in the fitness arena, or maybe I don't know." My friend Debbie, her dad was a police officer, and for some reason he was always on night duty, and I found this quite interesting and quite exciting in my teenage years. And so I thought that might be quite interesting. And there was an advert for the police cadets in a newspaper that he was reading. And he said, "Well, let's go and have a look at this." And he showed me some pictures of young people having a great time, sort of being outside, rock climbing, abseiling, doing all the things I really enjoyed. And I thought, well, that would be amazing. And so we went up to Scotland Yard at the time and they showed me a video of young people doing all these amazing things. And then they said one sentence to me, Baker, that changed my life forever, which is, "We will pay you." So it was like, school A levels, being paid to go and have fun. So I decided that I would go and get paid and go and have some fun. Not really with a plan, to be honest. It was a year's cadetship, and then I knew that I would probably go into the policing world straight from that because they kind of molded you and got you to grow up in that period of time. And then the expectation was that unless anything happened, you would then become a police officer. And that's kind of what I did. And then I was a police officer for 30 years. So that's a little bit about me here.
So it kind of fell into place perfectly
Yeah.
for you and Nicky by the sounds of it, really.
Yeah, it did. It did because I didn't really know what direction I was going to go in at that age. And I think I've got an 18-year-old daughter in my life, and I think, sometimes at that age we struggle to work out what we really want to do or where we really want to be. Um, yeah, so
So You said you enjoyed 30 years in the police force.
Mm.
One of the roles that you did was a hostage and crisis negotiator. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and what that role entailed?
Absolutely. So at the time, I got promoted to the rank of inspector. I worked all over London, and the majority of my career I loved. I had a really good time. I like people. I felt I was making a difference in the world, and it fitted really well with my values and my beliefs. You know, we have very strong values and beliefs. And I was on the firearms unit, and it was the most challenging time in my career. I was one of 7 women out of a unit of 650 people. I was in
Mm.
charge of 43 men, and we were responsible for responding to firearms incidents across London 24 hours a day. Now, I'd become a firearms officer, not because I love firearms, but I had no experience of guns in any way, shape, or form. But I wanted a new challenge. So I'd got like 18, 19 years service. I'd taken promotion. I'd been in uniform for most of my career. I dealt with a lot of incidents. I was an advanced driver and I wanted another challenge in my life. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do? Oh, I know, I'll become a firearms officer because that will take me out of my comfort zone and make me do something that I've never done before. And I did that, and that was great. And I did all the training. It was hard work doing all the training. And then I became a firearms inspector, and I was about a year or 2 years in, and it just didn't feel right for me. I felt like a round peg in a square hole, and perhaps some of your listeners can relate to that. But I think I think often we end up in a role where we're not sure it's the right role for us, and then it makes us question ourselves. It makes us question everything we believe to be true. And so I started thinking, well, should I be a police officer? Is this the right career for me? I'm not really. Rather than thinking, what else can I do? My brain was like, no, it's all or nothing. I'm here and I'm in this role. So if I don't like it, I have to leave policing, which was illogical in itself because in policing you can do so many things. Anyway, a lady joined our unit who was 2 ranks above me, a superintendent, and she became my mentor and took me under her wing. And I've found throughout life actually that mentors are incredibly important because you can offload on them. They don't give opinion. Really good ones listen to you and then they help you find your way. And I noticed something about her that when I left the room, when I'd had a conversation with her and I left the room, I felt like I was the most important person in the world. And I couldn't quite work out why. Now I know it's because she really listened to me. And she suggested to me, she said, Nick, have you ever thought about becoming a negotiator? And I'd worked with negotiators before, but definitely in firearms because you often work parallel with them. And also, I'd worked on lots of busy areas of London, so they'd been involved in quite a few things, incidents that I'd been involved in. But I'd never really found out exactly about their training, what they did, who they were, what their values were. And the more I researched it, the more I went, yes, this is the role for me. This is what I believe in. This fits really well with my values. It's all the reasons I joined policing originally because I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to save people's lives and I just wanted to be in service. The more I be the older I've gotten, the more I look back in my life, I realize that actually that value of being service is very powerful for me and I can't step away from it. It's where I'm comfortable and we all have our own different values. And so I looked at the course and I ended up going on it. There's quite a full-on selection process. And I went on this 2 week course. And Baker, honestly, I thought it would be a breeze. I thought I'm quite a good negotiator, communicator. I've been 20 years a police officer. Everything will be perfectly fine. And of course, it wasn't. That course changed my life because it really taught me that most of our communication is unconscious. Most of the time, we just have superficial conversations, tip of the iceberg, rather than addressing what's going on underneath. And it showed me a way of building relationships with people in very challenging life and death circumstances. And I had one of those epiphany moments, which most people can probably relate to at some stage in their life, where I went, "That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. That's what I want to do, definitely for the rest of my career." And how negotiation works in the UK for police officers is you do it on top of your day job. So I would be a firearms unit officer, and then I went on to professional standards. I would do that as my day job, and then I would do negotiation in kind of my free time. I'd put myself on call. Apart from six people who were on a full-time unit. And I was like, I really want to get on that unit. I really want to get on that unit. And I worked really hard for 5 years. I put myself on call. I got some really good grounding. I learned a lot of lessons. I worked with some amazing people. And eventually in 2012, I ended up on that full-time unit. A space came up. And then the year after that, I became the director of UK training. So I had the responsibility of designing and shaping the training for hostage and crisis negotiators and putting them on courses and testing to make sure that they're okay to go out and save life, really. I also
I
got to
mean,
travel around the world as well, which was incredible.
it's a super serious job, and I can't
Mm.
imagine the amount of training that does go into learning the right level of communication to deal with some of the situations that
Mm.
you'll come across. Are there any examples you can give us
Of negotiations, yeah,
that
sure.
you've been
So,
involved in?
yeah, definitely. I'll tell you the first negotiation I was ever involved in because I learned a huge lesson. I learned a lesson from every negotiation I ever did. And three of the most powerful lessons I've learned are these. Number one is we all have a story. So what you see is not necessarily the story of the other person. So sometimes, road rage where someone cuts you up, or if you're in the supermarket and somebody bumps into you, you might get an aggressive reaction. It's often because there's something else going on in that person's life.
Hmm.
And you meet them at a particular time when they're in their story. Now, some people share their story with others and some people don't. And when we don't share our challenges and our troubles, then we end up internalizing and it can cause us to feel very lonely. And loneliness is the second lesson, is that loneliness is one of the biggest killers in the UK. And I don't mean living on your own, I mean feeling isolated and alone or dealing with a challenge. And the third one is that we'll all have a crisis at some stage in our life, unfortunately, whether that is the loss of something like a loss of a loved one, loss of a job, fear of losing face, whatever that might be. And it will depend on how we are dealing with that, will depend on how we react to that loss. So I learned that those three powerful lessons. And when I went into my first ever negotiation and I thought I had these amazing skills and I'd had this epiphany moment, I thought, well, this will be okay. This is like, I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. I want to use these new skills. And I wasn't on call, so I got a phone call completely out the blue about 10:30 on a January evening. And as soon as I saw the name on the phone, I knew what it was. So I was excited. I don't know about when I'm stressed or excited, I get the same physical reaction. So I get sweaty palms, a cartoon heart beating through my chest. I get really tight across the shoulders, feel a little bit sick. And I had all of these emotions going through my body at the same time. And I answer the phone and I speak to this guy called Stuart. And Stuart was somebody who trained me to be a negotiator. So there's only one reason he's phoning me. And I said, "Hi, Stuart." And he says, "Nick, look, I'm really sorry. I know you're not on call, but can you go and deal with this incident? It's not far from where you live." And he tells me this, that a young man has just been released from prison. He has, for grievous bodily harm, he's gone round to his ex-partner's house. They've had an altercation, an emotional conversation. They have a child together, and he has never seen this child before. But she alleges he has assaulted her, but he takes the child without her permission. There's a big car chase around London, and eventually he ends up surrounded by police officers. He locks all of the doors, winds up all the windows, and he's holding the child up like a shield, and he's refusing to talk to anybody. So Stuart says, "Can you go and negotiate the safe release of the child and the safe release of the young man?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course I can. I've got these new skills. I'm very excited to use them." And I'm waiting for a car to take me to the incident. And whilst I'm there, I'm making up a whole story in my head about how this is going to go. So my story is this: heroin negotiator, which is of course me, arrives on scene, has an amazing conversation with him. He listens to her, she listens to him. He opens the door, hands her the child, is gently led away in handcuffs. And of course, none of that happened. I was there for 8 hours and he said two things to me. The first thing he said was, "You don't understand." And I think quite a lot of people can relate to that. Either they've said it before to people who are just not hearing them and not understanding them, or they've had it said to them, you don't understand. And the second one, I'm not going to repeat, but it was go away, please, and something along those lines, maybe not quite as polite. And the baby was fine and was rescued, but the young man ended up being tasered and there was a big fight. And I walked away from that thinking, oh my goodness, I am useless. I'm never going to be a great negotiator. I can't believe I haven't remembered any of my skills. And I really questioned everything. I've been so excited about doing the course. I'd been successful. It was amazing. And here I was, and I'd messed up my first negotiation, in my opinion. And so, yeah, I felt like a failure. And eventually, after watching other negotiators and doing more negotiations, I realized that that whole conversation about being about me, it being what I had wanted. I'd never stepped into his shoes and they'd never gone, what does the world look like from his perspective?
Hmm.
So I'm pretty sure he didn't see this heroine negotiator coming to save him. I'm imagining he saw a white, middle-aged, middle-class woman and probably thought, well, what have we got in common? You're going to take my child away from me and I've only just met her and you're going to send me back to prison. And if I had my time again, I would have started that conversation very differently and probably said something along the lines of, you're probably looking at me, although I don't know this to be true, but you're probably looking at me and thinking, what on earth has a middle-aged white woman got in common with you? And that all I want to do is take your child off you and send you back to prison. Because I think if I was sat where you're sitting, that's exactly how I'd think. And immediately you start to break down those barriers and you start to get a connection with somebody.
So to me, it sounds like, and that I'm really glad you've explained that story, and thank you for sharing that. And to me, it kind of feels like there's one key word within communication, and that's understanding.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. I would say probably listening to understand, because I think that listening is a superpower and is very underrated. And we all think we listen, and actually, most of the time, we're listening to either have our say or we're listening to give our opinion. We're listening, but we're not really listening. We're passively listening because we're already thinking about other things. Whereas active listen, we call it active listening or focused listening, is where you're very much in the present moment with the other person and you have to get rid of all of your bias and all of your judgments. And that's a really hard thing to do. Sounds very easy. You start to listen to how you listen, and you'll soon notice that you're waiting for them to pause so you can have your say, or you're waiting for a chance to move on from the conversation, so you're not really listening, or you might be doing something else. So staying present fully with somebody and listening with curiosity and listening to understand is incredibly important.
I was asking you at the beginning, and I wanted to ask you again now. How do you think a lot of these communication skills are key to
Mm,
football? Like with this being a football podcast, I thought I would
mm,
ask you about how do you think a lot of these communication skills are so key in
mm.
the game we all love? Because there's no doubt about it, communication in football is a massive thing, whether that be players on the pitch, whether it be somebody that's struggling, got issues off the pitch between a
Yeah,
manager and a player. It can occur in like so many kind of different ways in football.
yeah, and that's a great question, Baker. And for me, communication is fundamental in whatever role you do, whether you're a hostage and crisis negotiation, whether you're a parent, whether you're a footballer, whether you're a manager, whether you're somebody in the crowd shouting things out. Everything we do is based in communication. And
Yeah.
our relationships break down generally when there is a miscommunication or a misunderstanding of that communication, or there's a lack of communication. So, for example, now I watch quite a bit of football, and you see where there's a breakdown between the manager and the team, and the communication isn't working because the team are not playing how the manager wants them to play. And then you get that breakdown, and the team doesn't play very well. It doesn't play to its potential. And I'm sure your listeners can relate to this, but you'll see teams where they're playing above how they should be playing. And somehow the manager is getting this amazingness from players that don't cost as much money as the other players, or
Yeah.
however that might be. And that's all down to communication. That's all down to spending time with people, building relationships with people. Then, if you look at the team, so in a negotiation team, we would sometimes have two and sometimes have four. And it's really important that we work together and we know exactly what's happening in each of our roles, because then we can work to save the other person's life. And it's the same in football. If you take the team dynamic, if they're not talking to each other, if they're not listening to what each other's saying, then there's no cohesion and they won't play in a sort of collaborative togetherness way that people would do it. And you can take that into business. If the leader of the team, leader of the business isn't communicating down, then that's incredibly challenging for the team to know what they should be doing or what their role is. And it's the same in parenting. If you have one parent that says this and another parent who says this, then the young person is going to go, well, I'm just going to go and see the parent that tells me the things that I want to hear, not
Yeah.
the parent that doesn't necessarily agree with what I want to do. And then you get a playoff in parenting. So it's, yeah, it's fascinating. But for me, communication is the base of every relationship in every walk of life.
It's such an important thing, like you say, when you do put it into that perspective, it just does show how important communication is. Another question I had for you as well, Nicky, was how do you kind of view the words disappointment and failure? Because a big thing about in Scout was the reason Jamie set this up was in kind of support of people that have potentially not made it, have been rejected, and then potentially feeling down about everything that's
Mhm.
going on in their career and stuff like that. So that's a big reason. So how would you kind of view them two words as a communication coach?
Yeah, thanks, Baker, because failure and disappointment are incredibly powerful. So, I just want you to imagine, and I know this isn't true, but just imagine that your brain is split into two parts.
Hmm.
And on one side is an emotional part, and on one side is a logical part. When we are driven by the emotional brain, we behave and communicate in a very different way than when we were in the in the logical brain. So, for example, when we're in the logical brain, we can hear what's going on around us. We have thoughts. We feel comfortable. We feel safe. We can communicate in a good way. We can give an opinion. We can also listen to other people's opinions. When we're coming from the emotional side of the brain, that's very different. We'll probably either become aggressive, where we talk over people, where we shout at people, where we might even talk about people. We won't listen to understand or with curiosity. We will just listen to be right. When we're in the emotional brain, we love to be right. I love to be right. I tell you now, I have two friends. One I phone when I want to be right, and the other when I'm in a logical brain and I want a more holistic view. But it's important to know that this is what we do, because when we have failure and disappointment, or even when we have fear of failure or disappointment, our behavior and our communication is driven from the emotional side of the brain. So we behave differently. So we might become a bit more aggressive and say, that's not right, that's not fair, I don't believe this. We go into, there's something called the Kubler-Ross cycle of grief, which is a series of emotions that people go into when Kubler-Ross was a nurse who used to nurse people who were at end of life care. And she wrote a book and noticed that people go through these, I think it's seven emotions in the grief cycle. But actually, when we experience strong emotions like disappointment, fear of disappointment, fear of failure, or what we perceive as failure, we also go through that emotional cycle. And we can recognize this because we might withdraw, so I might stop talking to you. I might go, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to process it myself. And we might push back on that. And we might say things like, well, I don't believe that's true. So it's called denial. That's not right. That's not true. That can't be right. I haven't, why would that happen? And I'm a human being like everybody else, and I've experienced failure. And it's really hard. It's really hard when you feel that things haven't gone down your way. It can keep you up at night. And then, of course, you get into that cycle of, I've been kept up at night, so I'm not sleeping. I'm not sleeping, so I'm tired the next day. I'm tired and then I'm irritable. I'm not going to eat because I don't feel like eating because I've got that horrible knot in my stomach. And so that cycle goes on until somehow either we, as the person caught in the cycle, or an external factor will break that cycle. And then hopefully we'll get to acceptance, where we accept that what has happened and that we are then able to move forward from it. But it's not an easy process because we have such strong emotions as human beings. And when we go into that crisis brain, to that emotional brain, and what we really want is someone to hear us, someone to listen to us, and to feel valued and validated.
It's an important thing, isn't it? I think, like you say, it all does come down to the mind, really.
Yeah. The mind is really powerful. It's incredibly powerful. Yeah, and it can determine how we're feeling on any particular day.
Absolutely, and I'd like to thank you for sharing them points as well, because you never know, somebody could be listening and they could take a vital piece of advice from that, Nicky. So thank you very much for sharing that. And I wanted to ask you as well, I thought I was right a little bit about your book, Crisis. So can you tell me a little bit about that and what people can get from picking that book up and reading it?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about that.
You're
I
very
appreciate it.
welcome.
Yeah, I wrote a book about my experiences as a hostage and crisis negotiator. So it follows the stories of my life becoming a police officer, and it also follows some of the stories around some of the negotiations I had. And the reason I did that was because in every negotiation I ever had, I learned a lesson. And that lesson helped me to be A, a better person, and B, definitely a better communicator. So the purpose of sharing the story is to help people recognize how we communicate and the emotions that are involved and what happens when we're in a crisis, and also to be able to rethink things in a slightly different way. And so, yeah, so that's why I wrote the book, to be able to share those stories. Because it was honestly, it was a privilege and an absolute honor to be a negotiator. For people to share those moments in their life, some of the darkest moments in people's lives, probably the scariest in a lot of people's lives, for them to trust me enough to be able to share those stories with me was an incredible privilege and an honor, and an honor to serve my country, traveling around the world doing the same and looking after people. And yeah, I didn't want those stories to be forgotten and to be able to share those lessons.
I bet, like you say, it's a real privilege to have done that job you did because it is a super serious job. And like you say, it's good that you've kind of got this book out there and you say you've learnt lessons from the first-hand experiences and that somebody could potentially read that and then it could help them and teach them something too.
Yeah, that's definitely the aim of it, is to teach and share those learning. Because I'm a great believer, if we have these experiences and then we don't share what we've learned from them, it kind of gets lost. So
Mm.
sharing and learning and growing together and developing it is incredibly important to me. Yeah.
And I believe that book is available for people to buy now.
It is. It's available on Amazon, or you can actually go to my website, nickyperfect.com, and buy it through the website. And there's a course that goes with that. Or if you're really brave, you can get it on Audible and have me in your ear for 8 hours and 50 minutes.
They're very popular these days. Books. What's the name of them? Is it Audible
Audible,
books?
yeah.
Audible books. Yeah, very popular these days, and I think that would be good actually hearing your voice explain them firsthand. I think that sounds good. But as well as you mentioned your website there, what else do you kind of get up to now, Nikki? I believe you do a lot of keynote speaking events and guest speaking appearances.
Yeah, I do. So I now focus on Keynote, sharing some of the stories and lessons with people. I also offer training for teams and companies and leaders. I do some charity work. So I'm a patron of a charity called Crest, which helps young people in schools. They teach young people in schools mediation skills. So they're able to use listening and reflective language to mediate low-level incidents in the playground. So yeah, I I love what I do. Honestly, I love it. I love to see other people go, "Oh, I get it. I get it." Yeah.
Do you know, I was just going to say there actually, I can see that you've really enjoyed the career you've had, and it's great to see that you still want to do that and help people now,
Mm.
and get other people to understand things the way you do. So I think that's fantastic.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time talking to you.
And yeah, it's been a great chat, and like I say, thanks so much for sharing all of this information again. Hopefully, it will help some people out there to understand communication a little bit better. But I'm very much looking forward to your answer from this final question, Nikki,
Mm.
because the way we always wrap up is we always say if you could give yourself a piece of advice, knowing what you know now, to your teenage self that didn't know that, what would it be?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question because my teenage me was very lost. Was
I remember
often, yeah, was
you saying that you
frustrated
didn't
and
really
quite
know.
lost. Yeah, I would say, believe in yourself and follow what you believe to be true.
I think that's a wise piece of advice. Short and simple, and very big words.
Thank you very much.
And I think that's a great way to conclude it. So thanks very much for joining me again, Nikki, and explaining your story and all of these elements of communication.
Thanks, Baker. It's been lovely to be here today. Thank you for having me.